All right. So, wanted to first and foremost thank everyone for their time this evening. My name is Marcus Alston. I am the founder and executive director of Alston for Athletes. Very fortunate enough to be a NAMI Maryland board member. My foundation work very closely with the Hidden Opponent. So we're all very close partners. And we are doing a presentation today on the importance of mental health and problem gambling awareness. As you all know, digital sports books are now legal in Maryland. Gambling is being promoted at a much earlier age. Gambling is considered a form of an addiction, which is also a mental health condition. So typically, if someone's exhibiting problem gambling tendencies, they might have an underlying mental health condition. So yes, so like I just said, Smart Choices for Athletes is a collaboration between NAMI Maryland, Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling, Alston for Athletes, and the Hidden Opponent. Our goal is to raise mental health and problem gambling awareness for collegiate student athletes across Maryland. So a little bit about myself. As I mentioned, my name is Marcus Alston. I'm the founder and executive director of Alston for Athletes. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my journey with sports. So I grew up in a tough household. My parents divorced at a very early age. I enrolled into tackle football when I was 7 years old, and I had my first set of concussions at ages 9, and I had another one at age 11. I went on to play high school football at Mount St. Joseph in the Baltimore, Maryland area. My junior season, I was an all-state, all-conference tight end. Started to get a lot of big-time looks. And unfortunately, in my senior homecoming game, I suffered a Lisfranc fracture in my foot that severely impacted my mental health. Due to the severity of my injury, I was no longer getting recruited by some of my dream schools. So that's when my mental health really started to decline. Despite that, I was very fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to play Division One AA football. I attended St. Francis University, and I didn't have the easiest transitioning into college. I lost my grandmother, who was my closest relative at the time, and I was dealing with third foot surgery about 3 hours away from home. So all that for an 18-year-old kid was very difficult. So I began seeking counseling services. And then my sophomore year, things started to get better until I suffered a torn labrum in my shoulder. So now I'm going on 4 surgeries in a 3-year period. So it was very, very tough for me. So despite all that, I became the starting tight end my senior homecoming game, and my football journey really came full circle. Like I mentioned, my senior homecoming game in high school is when I injured my foot. In my senior homecoming game in college, I scored a touchdown and helped lead our team to its first conference championship as a Division One AA program. Um, and then I didn't have the easiest transition out of sport. So that's another thing that people often don't realize is this transition out of sport is very difficult. I had played football for 15 years of my life. And once I graduated, I was getting out of a very toxic relationship that also wasn't the best for my mental health. And this would have been the fall of 2018. And through a lot of those dark times, I just had a lot of introspection on my life, all the injuries that I endured, being biracial, um, going through a very tough breakup. Um, all these things kind of happened to me at once, and I just had introspection on my experiences and being an athlete. And it was very clear that my purpose in life was to help the next generation of student athletes through their mental health challenges. So I founded my foundation in the fall of 2019. We've been operational for about 2.5 years now. So I quit my full-time job in the fall of 2019. I went full in on mental health advocacy for student athletes. Since then, I've done work with organizations like I Don't Mind. I was on MTV's Mental Health Youth Action Forum. I've also been featured by Mental Health America and Yahoo, and I currently serve on the board of directors for NAMI Maryland. So that's a little bit about my story and really what led me to um, student athlete mental health advocacy. So now we're getting into the mental health portion of our presentation. So these are the three common mental health conditions amongst student athletes. The first is mood disorders. Mood disorders can include major depressive disorder, bipolar disorder, and approximately 15 to 20% of student athletes will suffer a depressive episode in their lifetime. The second is anxiety disorder. So anxiety disorders are amongst the most psychiatric problems in student athletes. It can include performance anxiety and generalized anxiety disorder. And then the third is a form of an anxiety disorder, ADHD, which is the most common psychiatric condition that sports psychiatrists treat. It is the most common in elite athletes than it is in the general public, which I thought was interesting, and I actually did not know that. So these are student athlete mental health statistics. So we've tried to find relevant, up-to-date statistics ranging within the past 5 years or so. So the first is approximately 30% of women and 25% of men who are student athletes report having anxiety, and only 10% of all college athletes with known mental health conditions seek care from a mental health professional. The second is relishing the positive feedback, rewards of immediate success, and a coach's attention may feel pressured to stay in an athletic performance focused part of the coach athlete relationship, hiding how they are struggling and in need of emotional and mental support. And that's from the National Federation of High Schools. Third is research indicates athletes are underdiagnosed and undertreated for mental illness as compared with non-athletes, particularly relating to the mental problems associated with overtraining and athletic performance. The fourth one, approximately 30% of women and 25% of men who are student athletes report having anxiety, and only 10% of all college athletes with a known mental health condition seek care from a mental health professional. And then injuries, emotional distress, and physical strain can put student athletes at higher risk of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts than their non-athletic peers. And approximately 35% of elite athletes suffer from disordered eating, burnout, depression, and or anxiety. And here's about 6 signs and symptoms of a potential mental health condition. So excessive worrying or fear, feeling excessively sad or low, avoiding friends and social activities, extreme mood changes, abuse of substances like alcohol or drugs, and prolonged or strong feelings of irritability, or anger. So if you, like I said, these are some signs and symptoms. So if you are recognizing some signs and symptoms in either yourself or your teammates, so here's some resources on how you can help out a teammate. So sharing resources, mental health organizations, campus counseling center, crisis hotlines, or even local resources. What's great about NAMI is they have state and county affiliates. So there's NAMI Maryland, and then there's also NAMIs specific to the counties throughout Maryland. Another big piece is listen non-judgmentally. So really trying to understand what the other person is going through just beyond hearing the words spoken, and instead of understanding exactly what the other person is trying to say. And then ask, so if you believe your teammate is experiencing signs of emotional distress or a mental illness, ask them how you can help. And then these are some mental health resources. Wanted to really have a diverse group of resources, understand that some people might prefer books, some people might prefer podcasts or apps. So starting over here with organizations, obviously you guys are very familiar with the Hidden Opponent. My foundation, Alston for Athletes. And then Alchemy Health is mostly focused more on mental health resources for the BIPOC community. The Trevor Project is focused more on LGBTQ, and the Athlete Transition Study is focused more on athletes transitioning out of sport. And then going into books, we have The Body That keeps the score. We have Mind Gym, also have Peak Performance, and then podcast. We have the Sport Psychology podcast. There's another one called Sport Psychology Podcast. And then we have the High Performance Mindset. And then there's some apps here that you guys might be familiar with. Calm is a very popular app in addition to Headspace and Talkspace. And then we also wanted to list some mental health hotlines for you guys here. So we have 988. We have some NAMI helplines as well. Peer support, LGBTQ, and for the BIPOC community as well. This is going to be the bulk of the presentation here. So now we're going to transition into problem gambling. So we're very fortunate enough to have a peer recovery specialist, and we actually have someone who is in problem gambling recovery. So we're going to have them share their testimonies, and then we're also going to leave about 10 minutes for a Q&A. So what is gambling? Gambling is the act of risking something of value, including money and property, on an activity that has an uncertain outcome. So there's many different forms of gambling. We have bingo, sports betting, which has been probably the most popular as of recent, lottery tickets, scratch-offs, games found in a casino, card and domino games when played for money, games of skill played for money, video lottery terminals, online poker, horse racing, dog racing, stock and commodity market, cryptocurrency, fantasy sports, loot boxes, social gaming, and esports. So this is what the NCAA actually states on sports betting. The explosive growth of sports wagering has caused an increase in sports wagering related cases. The internet makes it easy for student athletes to place bets, providing easy access, virtual autonomy, and essentially no supervision. Student athletes are viewed by organized crimes and gambling groups as easy marks. Student athletes who are gambling will ultimately jeopardize their eligibility. When student athletes become indebted to bookies and can't pay off their debts, alternative methods of payment are introduced that threaten the well-being of the student athlete or undermine an athletic contest. So these are the legal gambling ages. So for the lottery, fantasy, sports, bingo, and horse racing, you just have to be 18, whereas to do sports betting or go to bet in the casinos, you actually have to be of the legal drinking age of 21. So these are some signs of what problem gambling may look like. So if you're preoccupied with gambling, unable to cut back or control gambling, risks more money to reach desired level of excitement, gambles to escape problems or depressed mood, lies to family and others about gambling, risk or loses relationship or job because of gambling. And now I wanted to pass it off to Chaz to give us a about 5-10 minute testimony. Pass it off to Chaz.
Thanks everybody for having me. Sorry I was just running a few minutes late, but yeah, so I mean, where to begin, right? So I am a former sports gambling addict, still in recovery, and to be honest, probably will be in recovery for the rest of my life. Sports have been my entire life since I can remember. At 5 years old, I put on my first pair of hockey skates and was throwing baseballs by the age of 6. And so sports have literally been in my life since the very beginning. And, I never really knew growing up, playing in, junior hockey, being on the road a lot, sun up to sundown, 365 days a year. Playing sports, I thought was the end all be all for what my life was going to be, playing on a professional level, traveling around and, doing it as a career. And unfortunately, at the age of 25, played pretty much my last competitive hockey game, ended up having hip surgery, and that's kind of all she wrote. And so my love for sports never really went away. I got into gambling probably around the age of 16, 15, 16 years old with friends, whether it was just very, I bet you $10 on this golf hole, or I bet you $10 you can't make this shot, whatever it might be, right? Betting lunches, anything like that. And it kind of grew from there over the years, even while I was playing my respected sports. And, I never really thought I had a problem until I stopped playing hockey competitively, is when it really started to spiral out of control. And I think it was my competitive drive and my competitive nature that I just still thought to myself that I knew the outcome of what the sport was going to be, right? I love sports. I watch sports religiously, and you think you know what's going to happen, and then it ends up being the complete opposite. And so for me, sports gambling kind of became an identity that I was very ashamed of. And as an athlete and as that mentality, I was very scared to reach out to people. I wanted to do it on my own, which, is kind of the mentality I had my entire life playing sports. And so, it was a roller coaster going, from the age of 22, I'd say, until I was about 29 years old when I finally decided to get help. And now I'm 33 years old. I'm back in school getting my master's in sports psychology, so I can work with athletes on performance, mindset, coaching, and hopefully sharing my story on the sports gambling side of things, because there are a lot of similarities when it comes to the mindset of an athlete and also the mindset of a gambler. We always want to win. We always want to win the championship, or we always want to win that bet. And I didn't really have a big foundation outside of sports. And so that's how the gambling addiction continued, because I felt like I was still a part of that sport, still a part of that team. And so it took a long time to get help. And so I think my story is very similar to a lot of athletes that struggle with, everyday kind of athlete life, balancing real life, balancing maybe a second identity. And so, this resource and doing these calls are fantastic because it opens up the doors for vulnerability, and also, understanding that a lot of people go through things. Like I said, for many of you on this call, I'm assuming sports are, exactly what you guys love to do. And it was for me as well. So there is an end game to the sports gambling, and you can definitely get the help if you are ever struggling. So yeah, we'll have questions, I'm sure, a little bit later, but I'm an open book too. So you can ask anything. It really doesn't matter.
Awesome. Thanks, Chaz. Like he said, we'll have about 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to jot those down. Or if you want, feel free to throw those in the chat. Okay. So going to problem gambling statistics. So one Maryland study found college student athletes were more likely to gamble and use substances compared to the general student population. 6% of Maryland adults have a gambling disorder, and up to 14% of Marylanders ages 18 to 29 years old have a gambling disorder. Males are at a greater risk for gambling disorder. Minority populations, BIPOC communities are at a greater risk of disordered gambling. Youth adults rates for being at risk of problem gambling are 2 to 3 times higher than the general population of adults. Nearly 30% of male college student athletes bet on sports, and 92% began betting prior or to during high school. So here are ways you can support a teammate. Choose the right time to open that conversation. Let the person know that you're concerned for them in a caring manner. Kind of going back to how you can help a teammate that's struggling with their mental health, listening non-judgmentally to what the person is really saying. Be specific about the behaviors that you see them exhibiting. Reassure them that you are willing to help them and you want them to get the support and counseling needed. Awesome. Okay, so here are some problem gambling risks. Some of you might be familiar with some of these things. So losing things of value, it doesn't necessarily have to be money. Getting into fights, owing people money, declining grades, feeling pressure to lie or steal, not getting along with or hurting people you love. And then we will pass it off to Jim, who's a peer recovery specialist. Jim, are you there?
I am, Marcus. Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, of course.
All right. Thank you very much for the introduction. As Mark said, my name's Jim Nolan. I'm a certified peer recovery specialist working for the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. I actually just celebrated my 34th year in recovery. And hopefully I'll be around another 34 years because I'll still be in recovery. One thing I have learned over time is this addiction, just like any addiction, is something that we live with for life, just like any disease. We gotta take care of it, or it's going to come back and bite us in the ass, if I can say that. Now, back when I gambled, you had to basically go to the facility. You didn't have all the convenience of being able to pick up your smartphone or your computer or gamble from anywhere. So it is just, in my personal opinion, gotten crazy. Gambling is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be entertaining. And 95% of people living in Maryland can gamble and enjoy it. They can decide to whether they go to a casino. I've got $300 here. I'm going to go to a casino as opposed to go out to dinner and a nice show or whatever the case is. And if I lose my $300, we had a good time because we love playing roulette or blackjack or whatever the story. At 10 o'clock, we got to leave because we got to work the next day. So 95% of people can stay within those boundaries. There are 5% of us in Maryland that don't know any boundaries. And I personally think that as we gamble, and I'll speak for myself, back in the day when I was in school, I loved sports. I was super competitive, as anybody that plays sports seriously is competitive, and we want to win. After school, I didn't hang out with the guys that did drugs or drank or anything like that. I hung out with mainly jocks, and we played poker. And over the years, it escalated to where I was introduced to a casino. And I guess one of the things that happens is I wound up winning at the beginning. And when you win, you get this high, this adrenaline rush, the dopamine hit, and it's amazing. And you think, I can live like this. I can do this. Now, for me, again, we didn't have smartphones, online gambling. We didn't have all these casinos in Maryland. So I wound up having to go to Atlantic City. I had a job that I loved. I worked shift work, so I could go to Atlantic City anytime I wanted, whether it was between shift work, a day off, or whatever the case. So I would plan my jaunts down to Atlantic City. I tried betting on football games one time, and it was a minor amount, but I really didn't like the feeling, be perfectly honest with you, that it left me. I was busy worrying about the points, the spread, and all this stuff at the end, and I didn't enjoy it. So I was strictly a casino gambler. Somewhere along the line with my gambling, I went over an invisible line, and most problem gamblers cross this line and don't even realize how they did it. We get to a point where we're betting more money than we can afford to lose. If we do lose, we're chasing it to win it back, because you know what? We've won in the past, so why not win it back? Because that's what we do. As Marcus mentioned, if you know somebody that you suspect might have a gambling problem, somebody that spends a little bit too much time, gets frustrated over the points or how a game is going, in my opinion, the last thing we want to do is we want to shut them down. We don't want to confront them. We don't want to say, hey, I think you got a problem. We don't want to scare them away. Just have a simple conversation. Just say, listen, you know, I've talked to people that have had this problem. I've heard of somebody that has this problem. There's free help in Maryland if you do have a gambling problem. One of the smart things that Maryland did 2010 when the casinos came to Maryland is they decided they're going to tax the casinos for every table game they have, for every slot machine they have, for every this, for every that. They're going to tax the casinos, and this money is going to go into a problem gambling fund. And this problem gambling fund will support the 1-800-GAMBLER number. It will pay for free counseling, free inpatient therapy, free legal advice, all kinds of things that one might need as they have this disease. So we have a lot of good tools that we can offer people. The problem is, and the problem for me was, I never thought I had a gambling problem. I spent my complete illustrious, if you want to call it that, gambling career hiding the gambling from people, because I didn't want anybody to think I had a problem, because then I might have to face it myself. So this caused me to lie and manipulate and cheat. It wound up costing me my job. I wound up getting arrested, going into therapy, and having to change careers. And it wasn't until, I'll say I hit rock bottom. It wasn't until in my mind that my only option was suicide. And that was when it finally dawned on me that this is a problem. I got some support. I got a fantastic support from friends and family. And I realized the difference at that time between friends and acquaintances. And I realized, you know what? I'm not a bad person. I'm really not a bad person. I have a disease. And I chose to get help for my disease. So I started going to counseling regularly. I started going to GA. I started doing what I needed to do for my mental health. I still go to meetings to this day. I go to meetings now because A, I want to remind myself of where I am, where I could be, where I was, and B, on occasion, I can help other people in meetings. I can help other people realize that, you know what, there is a better way of life. There is hope. There is a chance of living sanely with this disease, but it's not easy. And I'll be honest with you, it's not easy, because when we gamble, we usually, if we get out of control, and again, I'll speak for myself, when we get out of control, we lose so much money, we lose everything, and we think that the only way we can get it back is to win it back. And if we stop gambling and we don't do anything but stop gambling, providing we still have a job, we still have money coming in, we still have this flame in our mind thinking, okay, I can do it differently this time. It's going to come out differently this time. And you've all heard the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different result. And that's what it is. That's exactly what it is. So I go to meetings to support myself. I go to meetings to support others. After I lost my job and changed careers, I was fortunate enough after I retired from the second career to find this position at the Maryland Center of Excellence. For me, one of the hardest things was to realize and recognize that we're not pro or con against gambling. I tell people, I try to meet them where they are. If they'd like to slow down their gambling, I'll do everything I can to help them slow down. If like to control it, I'll do everything I can to help them control it. If they'd like to stop, we have very good suggestions and help if somebody wants to stop their gambling completely. So we do whatever we can to meet people where they are. But these days, with the smartphones and the electronics and the 24/7 ability to be able to gamble pretty much on anything around the world is crazy. And again, that's me. That's not the that's not the Maryland Center of Excellence on problem gambling. I just think that it can be more of a problem for people before they even realize it's a problem. And by the time they realize it, they're going to be up to their elbows in debt. They're going to have trying to figure out how they get out of that. It's cost numerous people, whether it's relationships, jobs, or whatever the case is, because of this issue. And unfortunately, a lot of them even don't even know how they got in there. So again, in closing, I'm just going to ask to remember 1-800-GAMBLER number. If you don't remember anything else, please, 1-800-GAMBLER. You don't have to tell somebody, I think you got a gambling problem. You don't have to confront somebody. You could just conversations. Hey, look, I met this guy that was really screwed up and he had a problem and he'll be willing to talk to you. Just call this number. He can let you know where he was, where it took him, what he did, what he's doing to get control of this disease. And we have right now 5 certified peer recovery specialists working in the state of Maryland that we handle that hotline, 1-800-GAMBLER. And we will offer free help, free hope for people. And these days, the hardest step is to reach out for help. Because a lot of us want to kick it on our own. A lot of us don't think we need it. A lot of us don't want to face it, that we do need it. And sometimes it might just be as simple as having a conversation with somebody saying, hey, just give them a call. You have nothing to lose. You can always go back to gambling because it's not going anywhere, but it might make a difference. Marcus, thank you very much. And thank everybody for their participation in tonight's.
Thank you, Jim. Very powerful testimony. Like I said, we'll leave the last 10 minutes or so for questions. If you have any questions, feel free to add those in the chat here. So kind of going off of stemming off of what Jim just said. So here are some potential questions you can ask a teammate who may be exhibiting some problem gambling. So here we have, what do you do for fun? Does it involve spending money? Are you having trouble paying your bills? Do you or a family member go to the casino, play the lottery, go play bingo, go to the horse track, bet on sports? Are these activities causing family problems? Are you concerned about you or your family members' spending habits? Does someone in your family have unaccounted for cash advances, credit card debt, or loans? Is there any missing money in your household? Are bill collectors calling your house? Do you often argue with your family members, and does it often concern money? So like I said, just starting out the presentation, digital sports books and sports betting became legal in December of 2021. And the mobile betting became legal in November of 2022. So just over a year now. And like Jim said, the concerns of mobile betting, I don't have, like back in the day where Jim said he actually had to go to a physical casino to, put in a bet or a parlay or whatever, now you can just do that with the ease of your phone. So the ease of access is just higher than it's ever been before. So how does problem gambling affect your mental health? So loss of interest in activities, not wanting to spend time with family and friends, feeling that you can't control your behavior, feeling irritable when you can't gamble, changes in mood, and gambling addiction. So you can see how some of the mental health and the problem gambling correlate with one another. And then now we'll pass it off to Saul, where he'll give about a 5-minute testimony and he'll share his journey as someone in problem gambling recovery. Saul?
Thanks, Marcus. I'm sorry, I'm in my car. My computer was acting up, but I will be right to the point here. So, hello, everyone. Thanks for having me on the call. My name is Saul Malik. I live in Dallas, Texas, and I got connected with Marcus on Instagram, actually. But my story as a young person who is 25 right now is that I sought out sports betting as something casual initially. I had a friend who reached out to me when I was a sophomore in college who suggested I do bet sports with him because he knew how good I was at fantasy baseball. And at first I thought, man, that's just stupid. I don't want to put money in on something. I'm a college kid. I hardly have, 2 pennies to rub together. But said, what the heck, I'd spend $20 to go bowling. Let me put in $10 on a baseball game. And when I made that first bet on sports in 2017, I remember feeling like I was at the top of the world. I felt like a CEO, big baller in the moment. And I was someone as a kid who always struggled with feeling worthy of my peers. I remember kind of an ongoing joke in my friend group was that at any given moment, one of my friends lost their funny and we weren't as cool anymore if we weren't funny. And I remember always trying to play catch up to my friends and be at their level. And so when I gambled that first time, I felt totally above where I had before. And so I wanted to replicate that feeling. And so progressively, I went from placing that first bet with a bookie to betting frequently online. I was given an account by that bookie to bet at my leisure and, pay at the end of the week or receive payment. And guys, I just want to say that it was very subtle to me how it went from something that was recreational and I thought was making me this big baller to putting me at the point where I was to choose whether or not I wanted to live anymore because I was in such despair and I'd ruined so many relationships. And so essentially the gist of my story, because I know we still have other things to cover and I only have a few minutes here. The gist of my story is this. I used gambling to fill something in my life that I didn't have. I remember, everyone else at prom in high school was getting loaded at the after party or, hooking up for the first time. And I was the guy in the corner crying because I was afraid my parents would see I was around alcohol and I drank a non-alcoholic beer. That's the sort of guy that I was. I was a square. I was a nobody. And when I gambled, I thought I was a somebody. And at least at first I was. And that's not to say everyone who gambles will have the same experience that I had. But certainly the ease of access and the quick play online and go way in over my head with this credit was just a recipe for disaster for me. So now here I am in 2023. I'm over 4 years clean. And similar to what Jim was saying when I got on the call is that Gamblers Anonymous has been very influential for me. Having a good network of support has been great, making phone calls to people, staying active and being of the mindset that gambling was really not, it was my problem, but it was really an extension of a problem of not knowing how to cope with life. And so learning how to cope with life, I tell people often, and I'll wrap it up in just a sec. I tell people often that, those people I see that say, wow, man, this gambling really killed me. I'm never doing that again. Well, you're in for a wild ride if you think that that's the end of the story. Because for me, stopping gambling has been the start of the story of creating a different reality for myself, one that I don't need to escape from anymore. So now I speak to different schools. I am going up to New York in a few weeks to speak to some high schools. and try to encourage them to make better decisions than I did and hope that they can cope better than I coped back in the day. So anyway, thanks, Marcus. Appreciate you letting me be on here.
Yeah, of course, Sal. Really appreciate you sharing that. So kind of going to problem gambling resources, organizations, we have Maryland Coalition of Families, we have GamCare, Gamble Aware, and then the organization that Jim's with, the Maryland Center of Excellence on Problem Gambling. We have some books here, Gambling Addiction, Gambling. We even have one, The Girl Gambler, as well. Couple podcasts here, all in the Addicted Gamblers podcast. Hello, my name is Craig, the Problem Gambling podcast. And then there are a couple apps, Recover Me, Quit Gamble, and Gamble List. Wanted to add some current events because earlier when the school year started, there were 2 football players that got busted for gambling. So this is really to show you guys like, hey, this isn't a problem that's coming in 5 years, 10 years. This is very much a problem right now. I'm sure you guys are seeing, ESPN now has a sports book. They are basically promoting gambling at a much earlier age to young athletes. So here's a couple stories here. Hunter Decker is among 4 linked to Iowa State gambling charged with tampering. An affidavit included with the criminal complaint filed Monday in the Iowa District Court for Story County alleges approximately 366 bets totaling about 2,800 were placed on a DraftKings Sportsbook account linked to Deckers, including 26 on Iowa State sporting events. Deckers was under 21, the legal betting age in Iowa, when most of the bets were placed, but he disguised himself as his parents to actually be able to go out and place these bets. Then Iowa kicker Aaron Blom allegedly made 170 underage sports bets. So the compliant said Blum made 170 mobile wagers through a account on DraftKings. The wagers totaled more than 4,400 during a time period between January 2021 and February 2022, so about a year. He routinely and consistently bet using his personal iPhone from locations on the University of Iowa's campus that were not routinely open to the public. So these are some problem gambling hotlines. So like Jim mentioned, 1-800-GAMBLER, helpmygamblingproblem.org, 1-800-GAMBLER, and ask to speak to a peer if you would like some peer support. There is also Maryland Coalition of Families, and there's an involuntary exclusion program with the state as well. So since this is a NAMI presentation, I wanted to also list out some NAMI Maryland or NAMI resources. So the first is NAMI Connection. It's a free peer-led support group for any adult who has experienced symptoms of a mental condition. We have NAMI Peer-to-Peer. It's a free 8-session educational program for adults with mental health conditions who are looking to better understand themselves and their recovery. NAMI Basics is a 6-week education program for parents, caregivers, and other family who provide for youth who are experiencing mental health symptoms. NAMI Smarts is a hands-on advocacy training program that helps people with mental illness, friends, and family transform their passion and lived experience into skillful grassroots advocacy. NAMI Family Support Group is a peer-led support group for any adult with a loved one who's experienced symptoms of a mental health condition. NAMI Family to Family is a free 8-session educational program for family, significant others, and friends of people with mental health conditions. NAMI Ending the Silence is an engaging presentation that helps middle school and high school age youth learn about warning signs of mental health conditions and what steps to take if you or a loved one are showing symptoms of a mental health condition. And last but not least, NAMI in Our Own Voice. This presentation changes attitudes, assumptions, and ideas about mental health conditions. There are free 40, 60, and 90-minute presentations provide a personal perspective of mental health conditions as leaders with lived experience talk about what it's like to live with a mental health condition. So we will hold off on the survey for now. So what I'd like to do is give about 10 minutes for Q&A. And then the last 4 to 5 minutes, we will do the exit survey. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen for about 10 minutes, and then I'll open it up for Q&A, and then I'll share my screen again for the exit survey. Does anyone have a question? We can, like I said, feel free to raise your hand, or we can just go to the chat here.
Marcus, can I just add something in real quick?
Of course.
I think I mentioned as far as my rock bottom was the thought that suicide was my only option. A lot of people, unfortunately, these days still considering gambling as just a problem, a degenerate. A lot of people don't grasp the concept that it is a disease. And as it turns out, gambling is the #1 disease for suicidality. And a lot of people don't realize that. What happens, I believe, is a problem gambler gets lost to such a degree that they think that their family, their loved ones, or whomever would be better off with them dead. Some of us even think that they can't get out of this debt. There's no way they can ever get their life back. They've destroyed everybody else's life around them. And the percentage of problem gamblers, 50% of problem gamblers have contemplated or thought about it at one time or another. 50%. 15% of problem gamblers have had a plan in place and or succeeded. So it is a disease, and it's a lot more powerful than a lot of people realize. And like I said earlier, unfortunately, I believe it's going to get worse with time, because it's fun and games at the beginning, and you win and you get this rush and you feel invincible. But when the walls come crashing down, it just doesn't leave a whole lot of room. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, of course. And I actually, Brooke had a good question. I think that might be a good question for you, Jim. How do you get this message across to / reach people who don't think it's a problem /
Yeah, that's a great question, because, and again, I'll speak for myself. When I was in action, when I was gambling, I didn't want anything to do with anybody that thought I might have a gambling problem. I got to the point where back in the day, I remember taking a young lady that I was seeing at the time to a casino in Atlantic City, and she didn't gamble. And we went to this casino, and over an hour, 2 hours, I was up several $100s, and I let her hold some money. So she felt really good and everything else. And then after a few more hours, I lost what I had left. And when I turned to her to get that money back, her response was, "We've been here 4 or 5 hours. We got a 2-hour trip in front of us. I think it's time to leave." Well, that conversation went downhill from there. I was ready to choke her to get my money back, because I had to win the money I had lost. To make a long story short, eventually she gave the money back to me. Took me maybe 10 minutes to lose it all, and it was a very tense ride home. After that, I decided that I'm not going to go gambling with anybody that doesn't gamble anymore. I'll go by myself or with somebody that gambles. So I wound up making my trips to Atlantic City by myself. And until somebody wants to at least entertain the thought, just like any other disease, there's not a lot we can do to make them want help. We can always, again, I strongly suggest just the soft shoe. Say, listen, I've heard some people speak about this problem, and it can get out of control. And if you want to just talk to somebody about it, just have the conversation. And again, don't try to force them or anything. Just mention. Call this number, 1-800-GAMBLER, and just have a conversation with somebody. You don't have to give them your name if you don't want to, but just listen to what they have to say.
Thanks for that response, Jim, and thanks for that question, Brooke. Chaz or Saul, did you guys want to chime in on that question at all?
Brooks' question
Oh,
or
shoot,
Taylor?
I was muted. Oh,
So the question was, how do you get this message across to people who don't think it's a problem or do it socially?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because a lot of people are going to think that they don't have a problem. I didn't think I had a problem. I thought I was able to manage it myself for the longest time. Sorry, my dog is growling right now. But I thought I was able to handle it for the longest time, and there's going to come a point in time where that person who doesn't think it's a problem, it's going to hit them. It hits people at different times. It hits people at different ages. It could be a big loss. It could be a big win. It could be a relationship ending. There's a lot of factors that go into it on when you realize that you do have a problem. Now, I realized I had a problem early on, but I always went back, right? I would stop for a while and then I'd go back because, again, mine was my love for sports and playing and being active and everything. And so, I think there's a lot of ways you can go about it. Being a friend, like being just that ear, like he had mentioned, just no judgment. Always let people know that there's no judgment when you're just kind of listening, and you don't even have to give advice back or anything like that. You can honestly just be a set of ears, and kind of start very slow.
No, I appreciate that, Chaz. Go ahead, Saul.
I think for me, some of how I try to approach it, talking about gambling by not directly talking about gambling. And what I mean by that is a lot of what I learned about myself and my gambling addiction came from other aspects of my life that was intertwined with gambling, but that could possibly be more relatable to other people. And so I think taking a longer route around gambling to get to that point makes it a lot easier to dive into it, because what I've experienced, especially presenting to younger people like high schoolers, is a lot of them don't think twice about gambling, or it's not even on their radar. And so why should they listen? But if I talk about other things like fitting in school, and okay, that rings a bell to me. Oh, and then here's where that took me into gambling. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, there's some sort of connection. It's already been established. They already see me as someone they can trust or listen to. And then the gambling weaves its way into it organically. So that's how I.
No, thanks for that, Saul. We had one more question from Taylor, but it's very similar to the question that Brooke had asked. We probably have time for one more question because we do have to get to the survey here, and I just want to be cognizant of you guys' time. Does anyone have one more question that they'd like to ask, either through the chat or through Zoom? Okay, so what we'll do is I'll share my screen. If you guys, this is the exit survey. If you guys can please, before you pop off, if you can take 2 or 3 minutes just to fill out this survey. This is very important for for our presentation, as we'll have to report a lot of this data and things like this. So it'd be very helpful if you guys could just take a few minutes to answer this survey.